again. It's the State of Football Part 44 here on, flip that calendar, October 1st, Halloween, right around the corner. New York Yankee baseball, they know October. Don't get me started on that. Good morning to you, John Murphy, down there in New Orleans. Of course, Rick Serritella here in New Jersey, and we've got a Thursday night football game. Somebody woke me up and told me that there's a Thursday night football game. We'll talk about that. But the big news, the big testing point, the boiling point of whether or not NFL can handle the COVID, John, we talked about yesterday with the Vikings shutting down their building. They are now back practicing, but the Titans will not practice this week. They will not be allowed back to the facility until Saturday. They still don't know when they're going to play. It could be a Monday Night Football doubleheader where they would play at 5 p.m. Or the more logical thing, in my opinion, would be the 7 p.m. Tuesday kickoff. Why not sell more TV, add revenue, have that game isolated so that there isn't that overlap, because a 5 p.m. and a 8 p.m. start on Monday Night Football could get a little interesting there. But the headliner, the big line is, can the NFL deal with COVID? And it seems like so far, so good. But as we've seen in college football, anything is still possible here on a Thursday.
Yeah, and you saw yesterday, I mean, the first really recognizable name, no disrespect to their deep snapper, but Kamal Correa being, potentially placed, on the list, there's a number of different, variety of guys there, in Tennessee, some of its staff, some of its players. You had the coach sit out, prior to the game. So you kind of had a little inkling or signal that there's something was there, prior to this weekend, which thankfully it means it's all kind of self-contained with the Titans, right? Nothing with the officials. The Vikings are fine. We know the Steelers are ready to go. I think the interesting thing when you came to talk about the television is, if you do play it on Monday at 5, it will not be then a Monday night doubleheader. There will be 2 games. But we, for the nationwide audience, will only get 1, because then it's just a local CBS, broadcast. Like, you don't have a national broadcast in that scenario. So the CBS crew has been told, to be on call for Monday. Doesn't mean that they can't do something different. I mean, it is the NFL and, the Tennessee Titans, and, somebody else could jump in and, decide that they want that, and want it against each other. And then will the NFL want to have, a nationally broadcasted game at 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock going against each other at some point? But, it's kind of shocking or, unfortunate, because that would have been one of the better games, of Sunday in terms of the, competitive nature of that, as opposed to what we're going to see this evening, which on the other hand could have gotten moved to never, and that would be too soon to watch. So I think that's going to be the interesting part. The Steelers, they just have to stay prepared, and I think this is actually, something where if you're the Titans, you love what you're hearing out of their head coach, where he's like, nope, we're playing, a Steelers team whenever we play them, wherever we play them, at whatever time, with whoever we got. And if we win or lose, there's no, finger pointing, and there's nothing to do with anything. We know that this is what we signed up for. Man, that's a really good approach, to this, because literally everything is going to be done on the fly. And that's what's happening hour to hour, day to day right now. So if your head coach comes out immediately and says those type of things, you're putting everybody in line not to be asking about what do you mean we're going to go to this place to work out, or this is where, you're getting your treatments today, or things like that. Because like I said, they have plenty of resources to do all of those things. A lot of the things that were done inside the bubble for the NHL and the NBA players, the Tennessee Titans are going to be able to handle on their own, in these next, 2 or 3 days. But you're right. It will be interesting to see with a game that has, some implications. But the problem is also, if you keep playing around with when they're going to play, you then have the factor that both Tennessee and Pittsburgh are playing again. right? So you don't want to, they're on a longer week, but in a weird way, you don't want to then turn around and put them on a shorter week, to play Tuesday, Sunday. So there is some, kind of mixing and matching around to where you can't then play around kind of with, their future opponents and what's going on with that, which is probably why the Monday scenario makes the most sense, strategically, but financially, that might be something different.
Yeah, I think the NFL is going to find a way to maximize this dollar. And, to me, Tuesday, playing a turnaround Sunday after Tuesday, it's no different than a Thursday after a Sunday. Same deal. So I believe the NFL is going to find a way to put this on national TV, because wouldn't this be a good testing point too? Like, you hear the rumblings like, hey, maybe the NFL will have a game of the week every day. How does weekday football look in the NFL? Hey, what if they do a record number on Tuesdays and all of a sudden they're shopping around a Tuesday night package? I think the NFL would love to see what kind of ratings it draws and two marquee matchups. I mean, at the end of the day, I love the talk from Vrabel. It sounds great, but that's the best pass rush in the NFL right there. So you can get all the mental reps you want, but believe me, you need to prepare for a team like this. And Vegas says so, because Titans were favored 3, Pittsburgh now favored by 1. And so how is that going to play out? The 3-0 Titans. And again, you talk about home field advantage. These are the games that could dictate, where, if you're staying at home or if you're going on the road. So, it'll be interesting to see what the NFL decides to do. It's interesting, but I do think they're going to get through this COVID situation unscathed, unlike the NCAA, where we have seen 23 canceled games. Now, the state of football, Rick Serritella, John Murphy here, talking NFL. We're going to chop it up, NFL draft, a little bit later in the show. Also, we are on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, StreamYard, and we want to get interactive with you guys. To drop us a question on Twitter, you can drop us a question in the chat room here if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. We want to hear from the people, so come on. Bring it, Big Joe Man 2241. We see you. We appreciate you. And, switching gears, another game that's kind of flipped it and reversed it. The Denver Broncos opening up as a field goal favorite over the Jets. For some odd reason, the swap out of Jeff Driscoll to Brett Rippon has now made the Jets a favorite. And I think, this is going to be the only game on paper that they're favored to win. But I believe this is going to be another ugly game, because Vic Fangio is probably got a smirk on his face, even though he's 0-3, saying, hey, I got something good for you with that Adam Gase. Somebody called him this week the human bye week, Adam Gase.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and we know what the injuries that the Broncos have and who's missing in action, for them. But you still have a few things there going for them. Melvin Gordon, being one, Noah Fant, being another one. They still play solid defensive football. Now, Quinnen Williams might be the best player, if you were looking, for, matchups, or you're just looking for, where on the field the Jets have some pluses, would be Mekhi Becton, knock on wood that he's, healthy and didn't get too injured, last week with his shoulder. But do you risk that, on a quick turnaround on a Thursday night, depending on the injury? That's an area where, the Jets would have a plus on, the Broncos would be at left tackle. Quinnen Williams, who played well, so far this season, but has not been the disruptor or the playmaker, that they need him to be. But again, was he a perfect scheme fit versus if Greg Williams, or if you had asked, the entire Jets organization, I'm still not sure that there wasn't a little bit of a tug of war there, between the pass brass and the coaching staff in terms of Quinnen Williams might have been a higher rated prospect. I'm not sure scheme fit. He was exactly what Greg Williams would have chosen, and it would be interesting, to do some more behind the scenes research, on that one. But if you're the Broncos, and whether you're playing Driscoll or Rippon, the thing about it is the Jets don't have a pass rush to speak of. They don't really have anybody in the secondary that just jumps out at you, in terms of being a game breaker. So to me, this is still a very difficult game to watch, but could be another low scoring, output. And I don't see again, it's not to, be disrespectful to Berrios and the guys that are playing, but if, Berrios and Chris Herndon are your primary weapons on offense.
Frank Gore is your biggest playmaker.
So, well, basically the University of Miami for the last three generations worth, Chris Herndon, Berrios and Frank Gore. You have three guys, there that, that's really, difficult to imagine generating any kind of offense, there. So to me, something funky. You got to score on defense. You got to have a defense and a special teams, score tonight, for me to be convinced that the Jets are winning. And the thing about it is, even with Fangio and some of the things that, and how you've seen the Broncos play the end of that game against the Chiefs, I get it. And they're no world beaters in terms of decision-making early on this season, but I haven't seen enough out of the Jets or Sam Darnold to make me believe at home with this team that you're winning the game. And now I would be all for a bad Jets team beating a Broncos team with a inexperienced quarterback and Denver having to make that trip, to the East Coast, other than the factor that the Jets have just been the worst offense in the league thus far. They've got a max of 216 yards passing and a max of about high 70 or 80 yards rushing, is their best guy in terms of individual performance. I don't see that getting it done. I see like an 18-10, something funky, with a weird number, next to one of these scores because of how these two teams will play against each other. Low scoring, maybe a little cleaner football because we're getting to week 4, maybe not so many turnovers and penalties, but, again, we've said it a number of times and it's, you don't need to beat a dead horse. Sam Darnold, this is a game you should win on your own, right? They don't have Von Miller. They don't have Chubb.
Yep. These two men behind me, even though they didn't have a great defense, this is a game they would single-handedly, hey, let's go. I got you.
Even the third guy behind you, well, no, he didn't win any of those games. Right, Brady. I love you. I love you, Brady. I love you, Brady. But we almost lost any chance of recruiting quarterbacks to Notre Dame, and we almost lost Mel Kiper Jr. forever. So sorry, Brady. I can't give it to you. I really want to, but yeah. What you should have done is put Brady over there, Brady Quinn over there next to Play Like a Champion today, because boy, he needed to hit that a few more times. Good God Almighty. Whew. But that's the real deal, right? If you're Sam Darnold, this is a game with, I don't care who you're playing with, you are the best player in terms of you have the highest grade going out there tonight. You are the franchise quarterback. So you can't say that whether it's Driscoll or Rippon playing with all the injuries they have. Like I said, Melvin Gordon and Fant are the best weapons available to a quarterback tonight. But you're Sam Darnold. How do you not, have the ability, to come out there and put on a better performance than what you've seen? That's kind of incredible.
Well, I hate to say it, but another 5 years, we might be making, 5-10 years from now, we might have Sam Darnold jokes instead of Brady Quinn jokes. That's the way it's going here for the Jets. And, Mekhi Becton, who you mentioned with the shoulder, questionable. Jamison Crowder, hamstring, questionable. Chris Hogan, ribs and knee, questionable. Jordan Jenkins, questionable. I got news for you. Not only that, Ashton Davis is doubtful. Brashad Perryman's out. When you're 0-3 and you hear rumblings about your head coach, guess what? When you're listed as questionable and you're in the locker room and coach comes by, hey, you ready to go? I don't know, coach, feeling a little tender here. So,
well, yeah. One thing, the only thing that is not, questionable is the fact that this is going to be a bad game. Everything about this game is questionable. The coaching, the result, It's just a matter of the fact that, like, hey, we've been dealing with COVID for, 6+ months. We got a game now that's going to be canceled. First NFL game to be, completely postponed and moved, to a later date because of it. And this one right here is not meant for prime time. And honestly, probably never was.
No, this is about as bad of a football game on national TV for the NFL this year that you will see. And I got news for you. Here's what I do know. I do know that Adam Gase was at Taco Tuesday. Okay, and I do know that Brett Rippon, I got news for you. He's going to outplay Sam Darnold tonight. That's what you're going to see. Brett Rippon outplay Sam Darnold. And then where did the Jets go from there? I've got Denver 17, Jets 13. I think at halftime it's going to be like 7-3, 3-0, and this will probably be the lowest rated, especially for the second half, lowest rated watched game. Sounds like you've got the Broncos as well, John.
Yeah, I got the Broncos, and it will be very fitting to see. We brought it up the other day. The Yankees scored 22 runs in 2 games against the Indians. Let's see, come October, first week of October, who has more points on the board? The Yankees putting up a 10 spot October 1st, or the Jets playing tonight, October 1st. Can they match the Yankees 10?
How about the Giants?
Let's leave them alone for another day. They're quarantined for another 24 hours before we jump on Joe Judge and his fumble recovery drill.
Yeah, right. The state of football here, Rick Serritella, John Murphy, NFLDraftBible.com. We are moving and grooving towards the NFL draft. We are now, about 7 months away, and we've got about 300 scouting reports ready for you to digest, devour, dig into. Make sure you log on NFLDraftBible.com, get the virtual draft guide. Oh, by the way, go all access. We've got a great deal there. We're giving away a free copy of our good friend Neil Stratton's book, Scout Speak. So if you go all access with NFL Draft Bible, you get a free copy of Scout Speak book. Unbelievable deal if you're into scouting, evaluation, behind the scenes, tales from the scouting trails, and some of the things that happen during that process where you see guys like Brett Rippon at the East-West Shrine game. And I remember when I was in attendance, he was the best-looking quarterback between him and David Blau. I said, hey, these guys, they got a little moxie here. And so, you had to like what you saw. And I believe he had a pretty well played game there during the East-West Shrine game. But I was there for the tail end, the second part of practice during the week. I was impressed with Rippon, his leadership. Obviously, there's bloodlines there. His uncle, Mark Rippon, Super Bowl champion. And so, we're going to talk about some quarterbacks right now because we haven't dug into the NFL Draft Bible Big Board here on the state of football. And, I want to kind of pick John's brain a little bit and give you some perspective on that Draft Bible Big Board. Remember, our big board in the publication last year, it was as accurate as you can get. So, right now, I'm going to start off with seniors. We'll bring the underclassmen into the equation in just a second, but I'm looking at the big board here, John. I see, coming into the season, we had Jamie Newman as a higher rated senior prospect. I think, Kyle Trask and KJ Costello now have obviously injected themselves into the conversation. How high they can go remains to be seen, but I think they are well in the conversation, along with Sam Ellinger. You mentioned Kellen Mond on yesterday's show or Tuesday's show. It's like, hey, we've got to now see something. And then, by the way, Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh is playing really good football there. De'Aaron King is a guy I think that is going to at least get some consideration. And heck, Derek, if you're listening, hey, I think we'd love to have you at the NFL PA event this year and give you that opportunity, right, to at least showcase your abilities. And hey, if it doesn't work out, well, hey, Greg Ward, go look at what he did. Not too bad of a way to make a living there. So those are the kind of seniors, Ian Book from Notre Dame, Zarek Cooper from Jacksonville State. As I run through these names, though, John, I don't think from the seniors now, I don't think you really have a clear-cut consensus top senior prospect, but give us your top 2 or 3 guys out of the bunch that I mentioned there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you like what you saw out of Trask, last week. I'm not sure he's a bona fide starter, at the next level. I think he's more of a guy, that, when you look at, his skill set, I need a little quicker, decision-making at times. You're not going to get that much time. You're not going to have, that tight end the way that he does, there, to get drafted higher than a 3rd, 4th round type evaluation. I think, the athleticism and the footwork, that's the part of his game, that needs to show some development, the rest of the way and into the offseason. I think the guy that we're all missing on seeing, is Newman, right? We wanted to see what that would have looked like, the physical prowess that he had, the arm strength, and putting him in, that Georgia offense with those weapons could have really given him a chance to move himself up. And I think now where it might be he gets himself, or tries to go the all-star game route and play the one-off, scenario of, just having to go out there one time, and play, a half or quarter of football, makes him, an interesting guy, in just terms of, looking at, the bigger picture, of it. And I still think that there's something to be said with the way that today's game is being played. Does a kid like Shane Buechele, does a guy like, Sam Ehlinger, guys who have that RPO part component to their game, are they going to get, as much or more of a look, than what has been the prototype, guy, in the past? Because I think the same thing, when you look at the stats, and I mean, they won the game, so it's a hard thing to do, the same week as coming off beating LSU. I'm not sure you saw, what an NFL, offense or NFL coaches and scouts would love everything they saw out of Costello last week. It's going to be an offense that you have to, kind of dissect him a little more. A lot of what he did at Stanford is going to be what's evaluated for the NFL. The stats are going to be unbelievable, for it, but you're just not sure, if playing in that style offense, what it will lead to, in terms of final evaluation. And then I still think it is a junior, laden class, where the underclassmen, as usual, carry the day. And it'll be a 3-horse race. And, we've talked about, we're going to get a chance to see Trey Lance.
Well, let's get into that. Let me set that up for you, because I want to make a quick point about Jamie Newman real quick, because I want to know what the case is. Like, what's the deal? You heard, oh, well, maybe he got beat out by the starting job. Oh, maybe he was scared Justin Fields was transferring in. And I want to know what that relationship is looking like, because now he's already burnt the bridge in Wake Forest. What's that relationship with Georgia? Because all of a sudden, Jamie Newman, he might be looking for a neutral site to hold his own pro day. Like, is he even welcome back to that school? I have no idea. I'm just speculating, but it'd be nice to know. And I'm sure the scouts are going to be digging around trying to find out, because here's a guy that had nothing to do but benefit from playing. Because, listen, I saw him last year in Wake Forest. I saw him go up against Jordan Love. And he was by no means anywhere close to that level of a quarterback. I mean, he was okay. He had the arm strength. He flashed some ability, but he also had a lot of poor throws, a lot of missed passes that should have been completed. So, he had nothing to do but benefit. And to your point with Costello, listen, I mean, he had 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles. He could have probably had 2 or 3 more interceptions, the batted balls, the deflections. So, we'll see. He's somewhere between Gardner Minshew and Luke Falk right now with that air raid offense. But I think right now you would say that Trask is the guy who has a shot to be a day 2 selection right now. Still not there yet, but he's trending in that direction. I think all these other guys are day 3 projects, right? So All right, so let's go into some of those underclassmen that you were going to dive into, and I'm skimming through. I mean, those are really the cream of the crop senior prospects. Now, we go down to the NFL Draft Bible big board. Trevor Lawrence, just like any other big board in this great world of ours, I would imagine you can't knock that guy off the mountain. Say what you want. This guy, I had Carson Wentz graded pretty highly, Andrew Luck pretty highly. I would put Trevor Lawrence kind of in that category. But there is debate now. And this Trey Lance, the more I think about it, I can see Trey Lance having this incredible game, 400 plus, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and this FCS show off. And all of a sudden now, he could maybe overtake Justin Fields there for that number 2 spot. I think all 3 of these guys, Lawrence, Fields, and Lance, if the draft was held tomorrow, I think all 3 go in the top 10. It's just a matter of after Lawrence, how does it trickle down?
Well, I think the interesting thing here is you can very much, in my mind, I see this being a replica of the Manning, Rivers, Roethlisberger. And the same element is in there that you had Ole Miss, you had NC State, and you had Miami of Ohio. And now you have Clemson, Ohio State, North Dakota State. And I think that, they each have something going for them that is a pro and a con that we'll see how it works out. The more you see Trevor Lawrence at some point in time, and it's not going to be today, at 8:41 Central Time, but somewhere in this draft process, let it be at his bowl game, let it be at, if he goes to an all-star game and is allowed to participate, combine, or somewhere else, at some point, somewhere, there will be some, static about him, because the more you play, right, the more games that you get as a prospect, the more somebody finds something they can talk about. Justin Fields, now, he's much more of a vertical passer, in terms of depth of throws than Haskins was at Ohio State. He is a clearly better athlete. He has a different vibe to him, than Haskins, who, for some people, Haskins rubbed them the wrong way, even if it wasn't with an attitude, or even if it wasn't being a bad kid or anything like that. He just sometimes, some of his stuff, rubbed people a little the wrong way. And now you got to admit, teams are, they're their own worst enemies sometimes, when you're doing evaluations, as is it for anyone else. Because now you see Haskins in that offense, and he goes there to the NFL, and it's not happening, right? It's been a bit of a struggle. So even though Justin Fields is a very different player, better vertical passer, able to, make more down the field plays, and will make more plays with his legs, does the Haskins struggle rub off any negatively on Fields? And that's a question that would get asked at a normal combine by members of the media. If Haskins is relegated to a backup, loses the starting job or other, that will be part of the conversation. And to me, I don't think it mattered past what he had done last year. If Trey Lance just opted out, sat out, did nothing until, someone's going to fall in love with that. Someone is going to fall in absolute love with that kid, the way that teams fell in love with Roethlisberger, right? Because you go back to that time frame, and it was never really thought to be a 3-headed race, right? It was Manning, and Manning was considered like Trevor Lawrence. And then Rivers, well, he had that awkward arm angle, and could you keep throwing the ball that way? And the proponents said, well, he's always thrown it that way, and he's not a turnover machine, and he's got NC State winning games, that they normally wouldn't be competitive in. So he was kind of where Fields is, like in that neighborhood. And then Roethlisberger was this big tooled kid, but he's playing at Miami of Ohio, right? He was kind of the afterthought, type guy there. And I think this is a very similar scenario. And that when you get Trey Lance into any of this, he is going to, go off the charts in terms of intangibles. He is a vocal leader. You saw what he did with leading his club, when the social unrest and things have gone on. You see what kind of kid you're getting. And I think he has every opportunity to not only make his way, to cause some interference in those top three, but I know there's somebody, because I've read it, somewhere. I just don't remember who the expert or the person is. But I can 100% agree where somebody else has seen the vision of Trey Lance getting a shot to go equal or above either of these two guys. And I think that Trevor Lawrence has sneaky athletic ability, right? He broke about 25 tackles last year. He has that kind of eyes in the back of his head where he doesn't get jumpy under pressure. He can make all the throws. He says and does all the right things, and I see him, being a very solid, very few flaws, to his game. But I think someone's going to look at just the things that Trey Lance does is very intriguing in today's world of matching him with the offensive coordinators that are in the NFL. And you see the success that those type guys are having. He's going to make a real run at being taken above at least one of those two guys.
Well, yeah, I think, you saw it with Kyler, you saw it with Baker, you saw it the last couple years, and all you need is a new head coach like a Cliff Kingsbury to come in and say, hey, that's my guy, and this is the offense we're going with. I think the other a couple of things, you hear a lot of talk like if Dabo Swinney was to ever jump to the NFL, with Trevor Lawrence coming out, like whoever has that number one pick is probably hiring a new head coach, chances are. And like, boy, wouldn't it be something if Dabo could get hired by the NFL, have the number one pick, and bring Trevor Lawrence with them? I think that would be the only time that it might tempt him to make that jump, because it's gonna look at the Matt Rule contract. I think Rule's getting like $10 million.
Yeah, I think that right now, I'm not saying it's never going to happen. I think Dabo Swinney's career and life is already planned out. I'll just leave it at that.
Build him a statue.
No, I think he's at Clemson, and I think he knows it. Clemson knows it. The college football world knows it. Dabo Swinney is at Clemson until there's another statue of a coach going up next to the statue of the coach that wore the little hat. And then when that guy ever decides to ride off into the sunset, Dabo is headed south, and that'll be the only other place he ever coaches.
Wow.
And I think the one thing that that Dabo Swinney has, he has the ear and the listening ability to somebody he 100% trusts. And Nick Saban would tell him the stupidest thing I ever did was go to the Miami Dolphins. It just irked him. He would have been successful had the Dolphins listened to do things like his way. Because if you hire Nick Saban, you can't do it and then do it with hesitation or reservation, right? It's the same thing as Cliff Kingsbury. This is working, but it's working because ownership and Steve Keim and the people there were smart enough to say, if I'm going to hire somebody outside the box, everything has to stay outside the box.
Right.
I want my coaches. I want this quarterback. I'm running this offense, and it's going to work. And if it does, you turn around quick. And if it doesn't, well, then you spent a lot of money that you're, not so bad. And the quarterback scenario with a rookie quarterback now, if you screwed it up, based on things. You're not hemorrhaging for a lifetime, based on the rookie quarterback contracts. But I don't think there's any scenario right now, that sees Dabo leaving, with or without Trevor Lawrence. I think he likes where he's at. They just built a home there. He's making plenty, of money. Is there more money in NFL? Yes. But can he do the things he's doing and have the impact on his team, on the community, and on the lives of the players? No. And I think that the number one thing that will prevent him from doing it, I won't say ever, but mostly ever, is that he's going to talk to Saban, and Saban's going to say, you don't want to do that. Like, any amount of time that Saban would have stayed and spent at LSU or Alabama was a much better use of his time than what he did with the Dolphins. And you've seen it. And not to put Bobby Petrino anywhere in the vicinity of Sweeney or Nick Saban. You're running into a whole different animal when you go to the NFL, unless you go to a scenario where they are literally just saying, it's your show because we think you can mimic that level of success. That's why you haven't seen Urban Meyer do it. A lot of people have gotten cold feet after seeing what happened with Nick Saban there. I think the logical guy that might do it is Lincoln Riley. And if they come off a losing season, though, or a season that doesn't look great, and we'll get into that, that might be a little foreshadowing for where I see this weekend, for Oklahoma headed, as they play Iowa State on the road. It'll be interesting to see, can Lincoln Riley with a 3 or 4 loss Oklahoma team still shine, because he knows what he's doing with quarterbacks, and that seems to be what's, leading the charge when it comes to getting coaches, up the next step, with things. But to not go totally on that side of things, the final part of it is, like I said, the thing that stands out, it's nothing that Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields are not going to do to maintain first-round grades. It's that other kid may just be that special of a player when you look at today's NFL game, to be able to do the vertical passing of Fields, be potentially the best athlete of the three, although it's very close, right? Trevor Lawrence is not going to be just a clear-cut worst athlete of those three. He may just be the third best athlete, of two hellified, other athletes there. But I think Trey Lance has a real shot throughout the rest of this process because of how awkward a process it is. If you only get one shot at Trey Lance, no all-star game and the combine, like I said, I often tell, our buddy Justin, just jokingly, there's 2 places in life that you should not fall in love: the combine and the club. Don't do it. Don't fall in love in the club. Don't fall in love with the combine. But guess what? Plenty of people do.
Yeah, especially when they make that trip out to Indianapolis. They get a little bit of both. Well, quickly about Lincoln Riley. Kingsbury was really never a winning head coach at the collegiate level. I will say the other thing, too, is, he'll take Saban's advice until a John Gruden-esque type contract comes down the wire. Right. And it was enough, that was enough to lure Shiano away from Rutgers. Say what you want. I know on the national level he doesn't get the respect he deserves, but the guy, got a mega contract from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it was probably the worst thing for everybody, right? It was terrible for Shiano. His grandkids are probably set, but he comes back to where it all began. And if he had just stayed where he was, would he have made as much money? Probably not. But I think he would have had a lot of off the field perks, if you know what I mean, in New Jersey from the boosters there at Rutgers. And, he would have built his own legacy right here. And, he wouldn't have been building it back up again. It would have just been sustained. And boy, oh boy, wouldn't have that been something, a story to write home about. So the other last thing I get asked all the time is like, what's the deal with Ohio State quarterbacks? Like, how much do you factor that into the evaluation equation? for me, I don't factor it in zero, but it's like human nature, just like anybody else. It has to creep in, like going back to Bobby Hoyer, right? I mean, the Ohio State quarterbacks, whether it's Terrell Pryor, Troy Smith, Cardell Jones, Braxton Miller, Dwayne Haskins. I mean, it just seems like there's a jinx with Ohio State quarterbacks. Now, for me personally, and John, I could probably speak for him too, like every player is a case-by-case evaluation, so you can't let that factor into the equation. But, you get some of these owners involved into the draft process, and, they hear something silly like that, all of a sudden, hey, I don't know about Ohio State quarterbacks. So we'll see if Justin Fields can, kind of buck the trend. See what I did there? But to me, I still think Haskins, honestly, in my opinion, is a higher rated prospect than Justin Fields is, coming out, obviously two different styles. But if I had to choose one, I'm going Haskins over Fields. All right. A couple news and notes from our super producer, Samantha. Matt Rule strikes again. He's got New York roots from the Northeast, being a Long Islander, coaching at Temple. He signs our good friend Pete Guerrero from Monmouth, that 2,000-yard rusher, FCS junior running back who declared. XFL says they're kicking off in 2022. We kind of knew that. And then the big news here on the closing note, John, another Titans player has tested positive for COVID. The Titans facility will remain shut down. And, there will not be a Monday night game. There will not be a Tuesday night game. In fact, this game will not be played at all in week 4. So now it's like, hey, do we tack this on at the end of the season? Do we get creative with the bye weeks? The NFL is going to have some explaining to do.
Yeah, I think, once you had any more positives, you had to go a different way, right? And this is across the board, right? You're seeing the NFL has pretty much now told the next person or next organization that has a slip up that's man-made in terms of coaches on the sideline with no mask, players going out and doing things, even charitable events, and doing them where people are taking photos or showing them not being socially conscious, about this. People are going to start losing draft picks. And I'm not sure they're going to start with a 7th rounder either, right? It's probably going to be, something, pretty drastic. I mean, they didn't fine him $500 the first time.
Yeah.
They fined him $100,000, right? So this is going to get interesting in a hurry, there. But you see, the thing that kind of surprised me, because it, and we're missing the professor to comment about this, is Notre Dame now saying that their trace evidence leads them to somebody that was at their team meal, and that potentially one of their players was dehydrated during a game against South Florida, got sick on the sideline, and they're wondering if that guy, while getting sick on the sideline, potentially was the person that then the germs spread to the people that are now, getting sick. So, I mean, here is a secondary scenario that we mentioned to say, hey, you don't have to be doing something silly. You can be doing an everyday activity or an everyday scenario. And just like you've seen it, if you go to Walmart and somebody sneezes in the store, well, it almost looks like, everybody clears aisle 5 in a hurry. No one's shopping on that aisle, for a little while, and stuff. And it could be as simple as a pregame team meal and somebody who is cramping and dehydrating, who may have gotten sick on the sideline, and people associated with being on the field then had access to those germs. And that might have been, how Notre Dame is currently dealing with their situation. So I think they're now going to have to be creative, not knowing if they both had a similar bye week. That'll be something to look up first. When did the Steelers and the Titans have their bye week? How can they be creative with a schedule and not have it be, any less than 5 days in between that game, especially with the Steelers, having to have travel, involved with their next game because they would be going to the Titans. So depending on the Steelers' schedule, it's going to be worse for them than, when you reschedule a home game for the Titans, type thing. So be very interesting, though, to see now. We're at Thursday. Steelers are fine. Vikings are fine. The officials are fine. The Titans are not. I mean, if they have any positive tests between now and Monday, now we're starting to talk about a 3-0 Titans team that now what? Really the next hurdle here is how many more times can the Titans test positive before week 5 is in doubt?
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. I mean,
because there's no sharing. There's no, one thing. There's no sharing of facilities, right? Like there's no, if something else had happened and you can't be in your own facility, okay, like normally, teams would figure things out between like Houston, Kansas City, Atlanta, right? Like somebody in the general area of them, the Titans might have to quarantine themselves from the staff and players that are quarantined and try to go play with everyone else. And wherever their next location is, the Titans might be pushing their rest of their people in the direction of next week's game. I mean, that is a possibility because it becomes a fundamental flaw there to say 31 out of 30, 1 out of 32 may have an issue because, what is your response? Because you've seen in baseball, right? At one time, the Cardinals were 13 games back, of playing and had the same result, right? The Titans are 3-0. They're currently a playoff team.
Yeah.
Today. But if you get 2 games behind in the NFL, that's to me the equivalent of at least 2 weeks of Major League Baseball games. Like, because you can make those games up because the Cardinals did, right? The Marlins made them up and made the playoffs, right? So you had those teams that had struggles. The Phillies made up their games. Most teams still played 57, 58 out of 60. You're not going to be able to just randomly play doubleheader, right? This isn't baseball or soccer or basketball. You can't play more than, and then the NFLPA will step in for the opposing team and say the Titans are one thing, but you're not going to make the Steelers play a Sunday, Thursday, like some weird combination of days on this and add in the travel. So it becomes very interesting. We're at Thursday and we got 1 player and 1 additional staff member. If this happens again before Monday night, now what? Now how does the NFL adjust to that?
Well, that is the biggest fear now coming to reality for the NFL. And I would venture to say that the Vikings aren't entirely in the clear here. I mean, hey, something can.
Well, if you've done daily testing, like the one thing you would think is you might be because you've done all that daily testing.
Well, they just came back to the building yesterday, right?
Right. But here's the thing that and again, I have a lot of there's until you know differently about the Titans, you don't want to place blame, right? Until you know differently. But what you do know is this is the team that's had the single worst offender when it comes to how not to treat COVID if you're a professional football player. They've had the worst offender is their rookie draft pick. Right? Yep. He's clearly the person who did not read the memo, didn't get the message, didn't read the second memo, didn't get the message, and has had issues. And the other only part of it that is possibly the evidence to say what else could you have done, you found out after the game last week that their defensive play caller was left at home because he was either showing symptoms or had already tested positive. So their linebacker coach was not with them against the Vikings due to a positive test or symptomatic towards showing signs that he might be getting sick. So something was already amiss with them prior to the Vikings game. They took the right precautions, left him at home, went and played, come back, and you have, like I said, you have a practice roster player, the deep snapper, 2 other offensive players, and now Camille Correa was yesterday, and then whoever today is. So it's a variety of folks. So it may be something, that was, self-contained. Like I said, I mean, you're hearing the Notre Dame thing with a team meal, and it can be very, undramatic, and nothing, that's a red alert type thing that the Titans could have done. But you have to acknowledge the factor that it is a little bit, of a scenario to say the team that has had the worst offender as a player now is the team that is being the worst affected by this, in this time frame. What is it about the methods and the things that they've done, that have created this? Because it's now creating an issue where, like I said, if you test positive again by the weekend, you're going to have to now have a scenario. And I'm sure that scenario that I just talked about is currently being thought of, if not already thought of, by the Titans and or the NFL. Sure. To say we may need to get them somewhere else. Maybe Isaiah Wilson will get his wish because they may be on campus at Tennessee State sooner than later. Because you're going to have to do something to start preparing them to play a football game sooner than later against their Week 5 opponent, because you can't go down 2 weeks in the NFL. I don't know how you would ever make that up.
Well, I think the penalty, even maybe worse than losing a draft pick, could be, hey, you forfeit your bye week. And that's the penalty you pay for being an undisciplined team. And, I hate to put it that way, but
yeah. And that's why I said, I think until and the good thing is, bad for the Titans, good for everybody else in the world that wants to know. We're going to know why this happened sooner or later, because all the evidence is going to have to come out in order for them to play again.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've heard why it happened with the Phillies, they traced that, the Marlins situation, the Cleveland Indians stuff with their players, that led to them trading one of their best players. Like I said, the Cardinals having to miss that time, so you're finding out, this stuff. I mean, those 2 teams missed the soccer tournament, because of, the COVID stuff. So you're going to know why this happened. And like I said, from all the evidence that you've seen with other people, it likely stems from something related to a team something. But you did have at least an inkling twice here with the Titans. Once with the factor that they've had the one player who made multiple missteps when it came to that. And the second one was that you heard it after the game. Hey, the Titans won that game without their defensive play caller. And, oh, by the way, that might have been COVID related. Okay. And then all of a sudden, 24 hours later, here we are. So there was already something there. And like I said, it could be as easy as the same thing as Notre Dame, a team meal, and not at all the Titans' fault. Because I will say one thing, having gone there, multiple times, for NFL scouting and evaluation, they are one of the teams that they're on their P's and Q's.
Yeah.
As much as any team I've ever been around in terms of, you're in that facility and you take a left instead of the right to go to the bathroom and you have a security guy walking you to the bathroom. You know what I'm saying? Like, they are very, very secured with how they do their business, what type of people are involved, right? Where Robinson came from and whatever. So I doubt this is something that's man-made or, a bunch of people, doing the wrong thing. This is probably traced to a team activity or something related to a team activity and then trace back, that way, because it's not just one side of the ball. It's offensive players, defensive players, a practice roster guy, a special teams player, and multiple staff members. That really leads me in the direction of a team-related event. But now, like I said, the most interesting part will be, do you have to take the healthy Titans and staff and take them away from their facility to somewhere else in order to prepare? And then as the other guys are healthy, they can rejoin them on the road.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, listen, this is a bye week now, right? You're not practicing an entire week. So I think the NFL needs to look into getting creative there. We talked about before the season even kicked off, the NFL did take those hotel rooms in Tampa Bay, extend them and book them out 4 weeks beyond. Hey, they might be calling on that contingency plan, but we're going to continue to monitor that situation. Real quick, I did sneak a peek at the XFL announcement. The Rock had a little video. They talked about some cities. While they didn't announce any cities, New York City and Washington, D.C. were the two that they showed in the vignette. So maybe a little bit of foreshadowing there. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. We'll also get into our college football preview and predictions. Of course, our NFL selections, John and myself. We're going to be tied going into the weekend because we both got the Broncos. If you tuned in earlier on into the show. And we've got a special guest, Big Law, Lawrence Johnson. He did so great last week. We're going to have him back. 7 City Sports Talk. He'll be in the roundtable discussion. And, of course, we've got Friday Night Scout School tomorrow night, part 2 of our offensive concepts, of course, with Ryan Roberts, David Turner, the doctor. We missed him here today on the panel. Our thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family this weekend. And, of course, we'll be back at it again right here, the State of Football, weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern.